On the evening of June 26, 2017, outside a home in Hallstatt, Minnesota, a young couple prepared to film a video for their YouTube channel. Pedro Ruiz III was 22. Mona Lisa Perez was 19. Their content mostly consisted of pranks, small challenges, and moments from their daily life. Like many small creators, they were trying to grow their audience, and in the days leading up to the fatal incident, they had been discussing ideas that might attract more attention. The stunt they decided on had already been talked about beforehand.
For me, that's my relaxation. Doing jumps, doing fast things, crazy things, near-death experiences.
It involved Pedro holding a hardcover encyclopedia against his chest, while Mona Lisa fired a .50 caliber Desert Eagle at close range. Pedro believed the book would stop the bullet. He had previously shown Mona Lisa a book he claimed to have tested, where a shot had not gone all the way through. Despite that, there were clear signs of hesitation. In recordings later reviewed by investigators, Mona Lisa expressed that she was scared and did not want to go through with it. Pedro reassured her repeatedly, telling her the plan would work and that he trusted her.
So, the ultimate test to see if this .50 caliber bullet will go through a book is, I'm just not going to just set it and just shoot it. No. I'm going to stand behind it. And Mona Lisa is going to shoot it.
Family members later said he had mentioned the idea to them as well, and that they had warned him not to attempt it. A few hours before filming, Mona Lisa posted online that they were about to shoot one of the most dangerous videos ever, and noted that it was Pedro's idea. By that point, the decision had already been made. They set up 2 cameras outside the house. One was positioned on the back of a vehicle, and another was placed nearby to capture a different angle. Their 3-year-old child was present, and Mona Lisa was pregnant with their second. When everything was ready, Pedro stood in front of her and held the book against his chest. The distance between them was roughly 1 foot. Mona Lisa fired. The bullet passed through the book and struck Pedro in the chest. He collapsed immediately. Emergency services were called, but he died from a single gunshot wound. The entire event had been recorded. Authorities later seized the footage as evidence. While parts of the recordings and transcripts were referenced during the investigation, the video itself has never been publicly released. In the 911 call, Mona Lisa told dispatchers they had been filming a YouTube video and that it had gone wrong. The situation, which had been planned as a way to gain attention online, shifted entirely into a criminal investigation. She was charged with second-degree manslaughter and later pleaded guilty. Her sentence included jail time served in installments, probation, and a lifetime ban on possessing firearms. According to family members, Pedro's motivation had been straightforward. He wanted more viewers and believed a high-risk stunt would bring attention to their channel. The idea had been discussed, questioned, and still carried through. What remains notable about the case is not only the outcome, but how clearly the risks were acknowledged beforehand. The warnings, the hesitation, and even the public posts describing the video as dangerous all existed before the moment itself. The cameras were already in place, recording what was meant to be a breakthrough moment for their channel. Instead, the footage became part of a case file, documenting a decision that had been building over time. In the next case, the risk is no longer abstract. It's already in motion, high above the ground, with the camera still recording as the situation begins to change. Tijana Radonjic. On May 28, 2025, 19-year-old Tijana Radonjic was in Budva, Montenegro, on vacation with relatives. Budva is known for its coastline and seasonal tourism, where activities like parasailing are commonly offered along the waterfront. At some point during her stay, Tijana was approached by a local operator and reportedly offered a free or promotional parasailing ride. She agreed to participate. Parasailing involves being secured in a harness attached to a parachute and lifted into the air by a speedboat. Before takeoff, she was fitted with the standard equipment, including a harness and seatbelt, and was given basic instructions. According to witnesses and operators, she appeared calm and in a good mood as preparations were completed. Shortly after, she was lifted into the air, rising to an estimated height of around 50 meters above the Adriatic Sea. At that height, the situation changes in a way that isn't always apparent from the ground. Movement becomes less stable, the distance more noticeable, and any discomfort more difficult to manage. Video footage from the incident shows that, while airborne, Tajana began to show signs of distress. Witnesses reported that she called out, asking to be brought down. As the recording continues, she can be seen pulling at her life jacket and interacting with the harness system. At some point, she unfastened the seatbelt and began loosening the restraints that were holding her in place. The parasail remained in motion. With the equipment partially disengaged, she slipped out of the harness and fell into the sea from approximately 50 meters. The fall was captured on video and later circulated online. She was retrieved from the water and transported by boat back to the marina, where emergency services responded. Despite these efforts, she was pronounced dead. Medical reports later indicated that the cause of death involved severe trauma from the fall, along with drowning and internal injuries. Authorities in Montenegro opened an investigation into the incident, including a review of the equipment and the procedures followed by the operator. The company involved stated that standard safety measures had been in place and that she had not shown signs of fear prior to takeoff. Her family rejected suggestions that the incident had been intentional and called for a full investigation into what had happened. Reports also noted that she had no prior experience with parasailing. What stands out in this case is how quickly the situation shifted after takeoff. There was no indication beforehand that anything would go wrong, and the activity itself followed a familiar structure used regularly in tourist areas. The recording captures a different phase of risk, not in the planning, but in the moment where control begins to slip, and the options available become limited by height, movement, and time. In the next case, there's no open water, no visible height at first glance, just a rooftop, a phone, and a surface that doesn't hold. Kubra Doğan. On August 20th, 2021, 23-year-old Kubra Doğan was visiting relatives in the Esenyurt district of Istanbul. She was staying with her 16-year-old cousin, and in the early evening, as the sun began to set, the two went up to the roof of the residential building. It was around 7:30 p.m., and they planned to take photos and record short videos for TikTok. They spent time on the rooftop, filming and posing, moving around the space to capture different angles. The setting itself appeared open and accessible, similar to many rooftops used casually for photos or social media content. At some point during the recording, her cousin continued filming while Kubra adjusted her position. As she moved, she stepped onto a section of the roof that looked like part of the surface, but was not built to support weight. The area was covered by a lightweight panel, described in reports as plastic or fiber material typically used as a cover rather than a walking surface. As soon as she stepped onto it, it broke. She fell through from a height of approximately 50 meters, dropping several floors through the structure below. The phone remained recording, capturing the moment the panel gave way, and she disappeared from view. Her cousin immediately called for help, alerting family members, who then contacted emergency services. Police and medical teams arrived at the scene shortly after. Kubra Doğan was pronounced dead at the scene. The video, like in the previous case, did not become public content. Instead, it became part of the investigation, documenting the exact moment when a routine recording turned into a fatal accident. In the aftermath, family members stated that they had previously warned about filming in potentially unsafe locations. Some also indicated they were considering legal action related to the construction of the rooftop covering, raising concerns about whether the material had been appropriate or secure. What stands out in this case is how ordinary the situation appeared beforehand. There was no planned stunt, no attempt to test limits in an obvious way. The risk was less visible, tied to the environment, rather than the action itself. The camera was already recording, but unlike the previous case, the danger wasn't something they were actively trying to measure or prove. It was simply not recognized in time. By this point, the pattern is becoming clearer. But the next case takes it further, in a way that feels less like an accident and more like a decision. Tetsuya Shiohara. On October 28, 2019, a live stream began on the Japanese platform Nico Nico under the title, "Let's Go to Snowy Mount Fuji." The person behind the broadcast was Tetsuya Shiohara, known online as Ted Zu. Mount Fuji's official climbing season had already ended weeks earlier, in early September. Outside that window, the mountain changes significantly. Trails are no longer maintained, mountain huts are closed, and snow and ice begin to cover the upper sections, making the terrain more difficult and less predictable. Despite that, Shiohara began his ascent and chose to document it live. As the stream continues, he is seen near the upper areas of the mountain, close to the summit. The path is narrow, covered in snow, and bordered in places by steep drops. A fence runs along part of the route, but the ground itself appears uneven and icy. Throughout the broadcast, he comments on his physical condition. He mentions that his fingers are cold and difficult to move, and that handling his phone is becoming harder. At one point, he says he should have brought a hot pack. He also acknowledges the terrain. He describes it as slippery. He notes that it is getting dangerous. These observations are made calmly, almost as part of the ongoing commentary, while he continues moving forward. The camera remains steady as he walks, using hiking sticks for balance. The snow beneath him appears compacted in some places and unstable in others. As he approaches a steeper section, his footing becomes less certain. At one point he says, "Wait, I'm slipping." Moments later, the situation changes. The live stream captures the sound of his footing giving way. The camera shifts abruptly as he begins to slide down the slope. His hiking sticks separate from his hands as he loses control. The image continues briefly during the fall before the broadcast cuts out. Viewers watching in real time witnessed the moment and contacted authorities. Search and rescue teams were dispatched to Mount Fuji by police in Shizuoka Prefecture. The conditions on the mountain made recovery efforts difficult, particularly at that altitude and in off-season terrain. 2 days later, on October 30th, a body was located at an elevation of approximately 3,000 meters. It was later confirmed to be Tetsuya Shiohara. Reports indicated that he died from injuries sustained during the fall. What distinguishes this case is the presence of awareness throughout the event. Unlike earlier cases, the risk was not hidden, and it was not assumed to be controlled. It was recognized and described as it was happening. But recognition did not change the outcome. The live stream continued as the conditions became more difficult, and the decision to proceed remained in place up to the moment control was lost. In the next case, there's no extreme location, just a car, a live stream, and a moment where focus drifts at the wrong time. Jacqueline Sanchez. On July 21st, 2017, a car was traveling along a rural road near Los Banos, California. Inside the vehicle were 3 people. Jacqueline Sanchez, 14, was seated as a passenger. Another 14-year-old girl was in the back. The driver was Jacqueline's older sister, 18-year-old Obdulia Sanchez. At the time, Obdulia was live streaming on Instagram. The video shows her interacting with the camera while driving, speaking directly to viewers, and shifting her attention between the road and the phone. At points, she takes her hands off the steering wheel while continuing the broadcast. According to investigators, she was also under the influence of alcohol. As the car moves along the road, it begins to drift. The vehicle veers onto the shoulder, and in response, she attempts to correct its path. The correction is too sharp. The car swerves across the roadway, leaves the pavement, passes through a wire fence, and overturns into a field. Neither Jacqueline nor the other passenger is wearing a seatbelt. Both are ejected from the vehicle during the crash. Jacqueline Sanchez sustains fatal injuries and is pronounced dead at the scene. The second passenger survives, but with serious injuries. The live stream does not stop. The recording continues after the crash, capturing the immediate aftermath. Obdulia exits the vehicle and moves toward her sister. She continues speaking to the camera, describing what has happened while standing near Jacqueline's body. Emergency services are contacted, and law enforcement arrives at the scene. The California Highway Patrol leads the investigation. The video is later seized and used as evidence. Prosecutors charge Obdulia Sanchez with gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated, as well as driving under the influence causing injury. The case receives widespread attention, in part because the recording documents both the moments leading up to the crash and what follows. What stands out here is not uncertainty about the environment or the conditions. The setting is familiar, the activity routine. The risk develops in a different way, through divided attention, where the presence of a camera becomes part of the distraction. The recording continues without interruption, capturing a sequence that begins as a live stream and ends as evidence. In the next case, the setting is designed to be controlled, a structured activity with safety measures in place, but the failure comes from something that isn't expected to give way. Aaron Langworthy. On December 31st, 2011, 22-year-old Aaron Langworthy, a tourist from Perth, Australia, took part in a bungee jump at Victoria Falls. The jump platform is located on a bridge spanning the border between Zambia and Zimbabwe, above the Zambezi River. At approximately 111 meters, it is one of the higher commercial bungee jumps, and the activity is routinely offered to visitors with established safety procedures in place. The jump was being filmed. Before the jump, she was secured with standard equipment, including a cord attached at the ankles. The setup followed the typical structure used for this type of activity, where the cord is designed to stretch and recoil, controlling the descent. When she jumped, the initial phase appeared normal. The cord extended as expected as she descended toward the river below. But at the lowest point of the drop, while she was still around 20 meters above the water, the cord snapped. She fell the remaining distance into the Zambezi River. The impact caused her to briefly lose consciousness. When she regained awareness, she was in fast-moving water, surrounded by rapids, with the broken cord still attached to her ankles. The situation that followed was no longer part of the controlled activity. She later described being pulled underwater repeatedly by the current, struggling to orient herself and determine which direction was up. The cord trailing from her legs became caught on rocks and debris in the river, adding resistance and limiting her movement. To free herself, she had to dive underwater multiple times and manually pull the cord loose. After managing to do so, she continued moving through the water, navigating the current until she reached rocks near the riverbank on the Zimbabwe side. From there, she was able to pull herself out. Staff and witnesses reached her shortly after and provided assistance. She was first treated at a local clinic before being transferred to South Africa for further medical care. Her injuries included a fractured collarbone, extensive bruising, and complications from water inhalation affecting her lungs. She spent about a week recovering in hospital. An investigation was launched into the incident, and bungee operations at the site were temporarily suspended while safety procedures and equipment were reviewed. What stands out in this case is the point at which the situation shifts. The activity begins within a system designed to manage risk with clear expectations of how each phase should unfold. The recording captures the moment where that expectation breaks, when the equipment no longer performs as intended, and the outcome depends entirely on how the situation is handled afterward. In the next case, that same shift happens in a different way. The system doesn't fail, but the most dangerous moment comes after the climb appears to be over, when even a small mistake can carry serious consequences. Balin Miller. On October 1st, 2025, 23-year-old climber Balin Miller was on El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. El Capitan is one of the most well-known rock formations in the world, rising nearly 3,000 feet above Yosemite Valley. Miller was attempting a lead rope solo ascent of the Sea of Dreams route, a highly technical climb that spans approximately 2,400 feet up the vertical granite face. Lead rope solo climbing involves ascending alone while managing the rope system without a partner, requiring precise control over both movement and equipment throughout the climb. By the time of the incident, Miller had already completed the ascent and reached near the top of the route. The most difficult phase of the climb was behind him. What followed was the descent. During this phase, he began rappelling down the wall in order to retrieve a haul bag that had become stuck in a crack below. Rappelling requires careful rope management, including awareness of rope length and securing the ends to prevent running out of line during descent. As he descended, he moved past the usable length of his rope. Reports indicate that the ends were not secured with stopper knots. At that point, there was no remaining rope to support his weight. He rappelled off the end. The fall occurred from high on the wall in an exposed section of the climb visible from the valley below. Witnesses in the area, including climbers and photographer Tom Evans, observed the incident. Emergency responders from Yosemite National Park were alerted and initiated a response. His body was later recovered, and authorities confirmed that he died from injuries sustained in the fall. The National Park Service opened an investigation into the circumstances of the accident. Reports also indicated that the climb and parts of the descent had been followed online, with updates or footage shared through social media, placing elements of the ascent within a public, documented context. Miller was known within the climbing community for his solo ascents across Alaska, Patagonia, and the Canadian Rockies. Earlier in 2025, he had completed a notable solo ascent of the Slovak direct route on Denali. In this case, the environment was not unfamiliar, and the activity itself followed established methods. The systems used in climbing are designed to manage risk when applied correctly. What stands out is the timing. The ascent had already been completed. The most technically demanding portion of the climb was over, and what remained was a controlled descent. The shift happened within that final phase, where a small detail, rope length, unsecured ends, became the deciding factor. The recording and public tracking of the climb capture a different kind of moment. Not the attempt itself, but the point where completion gives way to exposure again, and where the margin for error becomes minimal. In the next case, the pattern shifts once more. This time, the situation is created deliberately for the camera and continues past the point where it should have ended. Tanner Cook. On April 2nd, 2023, a video was being filmed inside the Dulles Town Center Mall in Sterling, Virginia. Tanner Cook, a 21-year-old YouTuber, was recording content for his channel, classified Goons, which focused on prank-style interactions with strangers in public spaces. Along with two associates, he approached a man later identified as 31-year-old Alan Coley, who was in the food court picking up an order. The interaction began with Cook holding a cell phone close to Coley's face, at a distance of only a few inches. The phone was playing a message through a translation app, repeating phrases intended to create confusion or provoke a reaction. Coley immediately showed signs of discomfort. He attempted to move away. He told Cook to stop. At one point, he physically pushed the phone away from his face. The distance between them remained minimal, and Cook continued to follow as Coley backed away. The exchange lasted less than half a minute. During that time, the situation shifted from an unwanted interaction into something more tense. The camera remained in place, continuing to record as the distance closed and reopened in small movements. Then, Coley drew a handgun and fired a single shot. Cook was struck in the abdomen. The sound of the gunshot caused immediate panic in the mall, with bystanders reacting and some reporting what they believed could be an active shooter situation. The recording captured the moment the interaction ended and the aftermath began. Cook sustained serious injuries, including damage to his stomach and liver. He was transported to a hospital and admitted to intensive care, where he later underwent treatment and survived. Law enforcement responded to the scene and took Coley into custody. The footage from the prank was recovered and used as evidence during legal proceedings. In court, prosecutors argued that the situation did not justify the use of deadly force. The defense argued that Coley felt threatened by the proximity and persistence of the interaction and acted in self-defense. In September 2023, a jury found him not guilty of aggravated malicious wounding. He was, however, convicted on a separate charge for discharging a firearm inside a building. The case drew widespread attention, not only because of the location, but because the entire sequence, from the initial approach to the moment of escalation, was recorded as part of a video intended for publication. What stands out in this case is how quickly a controlled interaction can shift when one person disengages and the other continues. The presence of a camera does not just document the exchange. It becomes part of the reason it continues.